Welcome back, brothers and sisters. Last we left off, I had shared 4 ideas for how to use angels in your RPG worlds, and today, I'm very excited to show off the Spire Point Crawl map, a 100 point crawl map, actually, that I designed and am actively using in my campaigns right now. So in this video, I want to tell you how I made this, how I'm using it, how I'm building the dungeons that populate each of these points, and how I do some overland travel with this type of map, that even if you don't want to do a point crawl campaign, there's something of value in there with how I do overland travel, I think. So, remember to pay your hobby tithing by leaving a like, and let us pray. Let's start with the design, and I want to tell you about the actual process I used to make this map, and then the inspiration that led into this aesthetic. So, the design was really easy. All it involved was going out to Pinterest and Google Images and collecting as many cool photographs of old, well, not even old, some of these are really modern looking towers, spires, castles, cathedrals, tabernacles, anything that gave a sense of cool height and had really interesting textures on it. I would collect those all. I brought them over into Canva, which is just sort of like an easier to use version of Photoshop, I would say. I did 2 things to these images. One, I ran it through a color filter, a 2-tone color filter, so the top layer, or the topmost highlight color, I have is this green coded color, and the bottommost was black to just give it this very high contrast look to it. Then I clicked background remove. Once I had each of these, I had them individually selected. I'd do background remove, and it would crop out basically everything else in the image except whatever the focal point was. And even if it missed a few things, it was easy to go in with a little brush feature and remove anything kind of along the edges and stuff like that. Then I just laid them out in this aesthetic, adding this little like cool bridge feature, just stacking them one on top of the other and kind of having to work with layering and things like that. So it was time consuming, but overall pretty simple. Now, the aesthetic, the inspiration behind this setting and this map it's based off my homebrew world of Ark, the Arcane Repopulation Craft, which is this monolithic cathedral, or planet-sized cathedral, that was built by Vecna, the mortal prophet, and his angels back many hundreds of ages ago during the final doomsday to bring all of humanity aboard it, hurl it off into the heavens so that it could soar through the void to the new world. Now, does the new world exist? Is the old world actually destroyed? What is the real purpose of the Ark? Like, that's all sort of like up in the air, kind of very grim, darky 40k ideas behind that of like, ooh, maybe the church and what's actually happening on here is kind of corrupt. But this idea is that since it's a huge cathedral, I just wanted all of these spires. I wanted height and verticality to be a very prominent theme in this setting so that characters could be moving up and down these ancient temples and towers and spires and things, that basically all of this just acts as a mega dungeon. Because at its creation point, the Ark, when it was first launched out into the heavens, it was this super high-tech advanced piece of unparalleled technology operated by artificial intelligence and all sorts of crazy sci-fi stuff like that. But over these ages, as humanity has dwindled, as their numbers have fallen within the Ark, and cultists and demons and the Fae have infected it and are kind of moving throughout it, it's deteriorated. And it's it has become a giant mega dungeon world. And the outside of these spires, anything beyond those blessed halls, is the void of space, and nothing except demons can survive out there. And that is what inspired this. Just, I wanted a world that was inside a dungeon, but was big enough to be a world with factions and all kinds of crazy things going on within it. And this was kind of the result. Once I had the map designed, then I just laid out my XY lane style travel network through the spires to really give it that point crawl feel. It was up to a 1d100 point list, so it took almost as much time to lay out these lanes as it did to actually design the map itself. But now that I've got it, it's ready to go, and I can use this to run as many campaigns as I want, because a 1d100 list is a lot of locations, especially knowing that each point here is a mini dungeon that is 1d4 to 1d12 chambers. At least that's how I like to do it, and I'll show you in the next section of this video like what each individual dungeon looks like. But having used this in 2 different weekly campaigns for a few weeks now, I have 3 big things from the point crawl style method that I really, really like. Number 1, the biggest one honestly, is that it works so well for my brain and how I think about maps. And probably a better way to even phrase that is, it gives me very useful and healthy limitations and constraints. Because if I look at a normal map of like Faerun, right, I'm like, oh my god, this map is awesome, it's huge, but then I want to start zooming in on every little location, you know, and even if they do that in the adventure like Lost Mines of Phandelver, they zoom in on the Sword Coast, I'm like, this is great, a much more manageable bite-sized section of the map. But ooh, Neverwinter Wood or the Mere of Dead Men or whatever, like, I want to zoom in on that and I want to map that out, and then I want to keep zooming and keep zooming. It's this death spiral of mapping. The point crawl says, you can't do that, because even if the map is huge, even if it looks really cool, all of the negative space in between these points, I don't really need to worry about. All I have to worry about are these individual points, and I've given myself the other constraint of each one of these is a dungeon, 4 to 12 chambers, and that's all I need to worry about and work within. So it's been very, very good for me to avoid map making, world building burnout. Second thing I really like is for my players, and it's they get to decide the way they go about traversing it. They get to pick out their lanes that they want to travel through, and because it's a point crawl map, they know almost exactly like what they're going to encounter as they move through the map. Now, do they know what is waiting for them necessarily at each of these? No, but if they are going from point 52 and they want to get to point 70, then are they going to go up across this section where maybe they've heard a dragon is in point 68 or whatever that is, or are they going to go south and take a much longer route but avoid the dragon, right? Ooh, that's so fun for them to do. And yes, they could do that with a normal map, but I find it a little bit easier and more engaging with this style of map. And the third thing I really like is that because these points share proximity to each other and lanes, it helps me remember and think about how is the world interacting with each other? How are these factions interacting? With a normal map, it can be very easy to either forget that or be very overwhelming. There's so much going on, but this is just like, all I need to think about with 75 is what's happening in these 3 areas and how are those factions interacting. And then I go to there and I think about how these are interacting. So it just breaks it down. All of it is just more manageable. Now I want to tell you about how I actually handle the dungeons themselves, because there's 100 of them on that map. Now do I have all 100 of those dungeons figured out and mapped? No. I have maybe 10 of them mapped, if that, and 15 labeled on the key. And as the characters continue to explore the arc, I'll start coming up with more and filling it out. That's part of the fun part too, right? It's like every week I get to have fun building out more and more and more of this thing instead of feeling like I had to have the whole thing mapped out right from the beginning. But the dungeons themselves are also following a similar constraint, 4 to 12 chambers, and each one focuses in on a specific function or a feature of the arc or the people who inhabited it, right? So this one that I'm showing here was the Crypt of Fallen Martyrs. It was ran by an order of nuns who would call martyrs here to serve missions for the church, and when they died, they would either be entombed here, had their souls placed within a shrine depicting them in all their glory because their knowledge was just too valuable to be lost and sealed within a sarcophagi, or if they were really lucky and the nuns had the materials to do it, they could be cloned in the replicator's shrine. So that's just this one little dungeon, but then you can see this staircase here and this staircase here, and it's blocked by a doorway because I kind of sealed the characters in at the beginning, but there's a staircase here. There's a little text that says, to area 38 or to area 57. Like, this is just a way when you're zoomed in on this map in my VTT, you also can remember, like, where would we go if we went that way? And that's just really fun for the characters. But what I've enjoyed most about building out these dungeons is each one is so focused on a specific purpose. So this one was a crypt, but there might be one that I've kind of had in my head that I want to map out soon is like a long stretch of hall that is a ventilation type area of the arc where air is circulated and poisonous gases are pulled in here to be purified and reintroduced into the atmosphere. And so the characters are going to be moving through this section of dungeon that has giant fans spinning around and big ventilation cubes that monsters are building their nests in. I was thinking maybe there's like ghosts here, like maybe the people who ran this section of dungeon, the engineers or whatever, discovered a poison had been filtering through the arc that would have killed everybody, so they sealed this entire section of dungeon off and killed themselves as martyrs, and now their ghosts kind of linger here amongst the fumes and things that aren't as poisonous as they used to be, but like that's just a cool little theme for the dungeon, and I can do that and explore the lore and the aesthetics of the arc and each spire as we progress through the campaign. With every dungeon, I get to tell a little mini story about how this place was built and how it has changed over time and how the beliefs of the world have gotten warped or twisted over the ages. And I build all the terrain myself, following a similar method of how I built the map, and that's been a lot of fun too. So I implore you to try out this method of mapping your world and dungeons. Hopefully up to this point, you've been kind of picking up on this theme of simple mechanics, simple use of the materials, but with a lot of rich narrative storytelling opportunity behind it, right? That's exactly how I hope that this overland travel mechanic that I use also comes across. So anytime the party wants to move from one point to the other. It's a simple skill challenge. Get 3 successes before you get 2 failures, and a nat 1 counts as 2 failures. A crit nat 20 is 2 successes, right? And when it comes to the challenge, I will kind of narrate to the characters a little bit about what they can expect or what's going on between these 2 points. So for example, one of my campaigns, the characters were coming back from a cult of horned demons to their home base. And this cult had been summoning lesser horned demons and kind of mutating their followers into horned orcish kind of creatures. And so I said, hypothetically, if these were the 2 points, right, they were trying to go from here to here, I was like, there are signs that the survivors of your raid of the cult's hideout are still running amok. They're trampling through this section of the ark, cutting down anything they find and building small altars with horns and things in honor of their god, Taurus, the 1,000-horned bull, right? So some of the skill checks they were attempting were stealth, to avoid where these cultists were at, and perception to sniff out or listen for where the cultists might be doing their war drums and chants or whatever. Really, really fun. An opportunity for the characters to use skills and lean into parts of their character, how they wanted to play them at the table, that they don't normally get to in like a combat environment, right? But in this instance, there was a nat 1. And so as the party was progressing to point 62, they bumped into an Etten that I reflavored as like this hulking monstrosity of 2 conjoined cultists that the cult had tried to use to summon a demon and just let it run amok when it turned into a rage-filled monster. So the party had this really cool little mini fight in basically like a 2-chamber dungeon little mini section that I randomly generated, threw some terrain in there, and just had that ready to go on the side in case that happened. And then when the fight was over, the party just finished up their challenge. They'd had the 2 failures, so I wasn't going to make them start over, but they got to the next point. And now, anytime they want to move through this map, they know that's what's going to happen, so they can start getting magical items or tools or new skill proficiencies to help them with that, to avoid these bad outcomes of a failed skill challenge. But I also get to do a little bit of expanded world building sort of beyond the guardrails I'd put up, right? I know I said, like, I don't have to prep for things outside of these individual points, except in this case where I give myself the freedom without restraints to needing to map every individual quarter that connects all of these areas, right? I can just have a little fun micro map with a fun little encounter that tells more of the lore and more of the story of the world or the environment connecting these 2 points and kind of help mesh them together for an immersive world. It's so fun. And that is the end of today's RPG sermon of how I built and used my 1D100 Spire point crawl map. If you really enjoyed or want to use some of these resources and the art and things to run your own campaign, then go check out the church's Patreon. The lowest tier is a $3 a month tithing, right? Easiest way to support me and what I'm doing. And this was the most recent Sunday homebrew post, so it came with the art and a bunch of prep templates that I put together that can help you map out, label, and have little session notes for different sections of the dungeon. I broke it out into groups of 20. So there is one big master list of 100 little lines to label it out on one printout. But if you want something a little more in-depth, then you can print all those out, throw them in your binder, and basically be ready to start running your campaign. At this point, between everything that I've been releasing on my Patreon, if you feel like I want to run a big campaign and I want it to look really cool and I want to have all the resources I need to do it, but I don't really know where to get that, the church's Patreon is the best place to get that. Like, I release digital minis, digital terrain, pre-generated maps, templates to put all of your notes no matter what system you're running. These aren't like made for 5e note-taking. It's system agnostic. So much value to be had on the church's Patreon. And if that's not really interest to you, but you still want to support the church, go check out the Doom Stronghold, my ongoing RPG Kickstarter for a handmade zine full of random tables to help you generate stronghold ideas and the followers that might be in there and the dungeons beneath them. We are almost halfway to 5K, which was probably like the final stretch goal of the Kickstarter. 5 days left to go. Over 200 people have supported the project. It's just been awesome to see. So I've got that linked down below. You should definitely go check that out. But besides that, that's all I've got. So thank you so much for watching. And we say these things in their unholy names. Amen.